Welcome, everybody, to Redacted on this Thursday evening. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
And we're dealing with daylight saving time. So normally we're live at 4 p.m. Eastern, but today, because of the daylight saving time, which needs to end, it's 5 p.m. Eastern. Welcome to our big show. We've got a jam-packed show for you, and on this show, we try to seek the truth. We have no billionaire backers who are driving our narrative. We go where the truth leads us, and we've got a lot of stories we're going to cover on today's show. We're going to start with what the United Nations just decided a short time ago this afternoon on investigating biolabs in Ukraine. This, of course, was being asked for by Vladimir Putin, and some startling details, of course, about the relationship with Hunter Biden, these biolabs, and what sort of investigation we might actually get in Ukraine. We'll have that story.
Plus, we have an update for you on the story we brought to you this week about the government reaching into Twitter, Facebook, other social media platforms and saying, we don't like people talking about this list of things. How about we flag things for you? We talked to the doctor who found this out, and he's going to expand on this story in an amazing way that we had not known before. We went to the source, people, and we are excited to bring it to you.
Yeah, so Dr. Shiva is just going to be joining us in a few minutes here on the show to go over that story. We're also going to look at New Zealand because, man, what's going on with the Kiwis down there? What has happened? We have a lot of New Zealand viewers writing to us saying, guys, this island is going crazy. What is happening with the government down there?
It's a world gone wild. We're going to show you some protests. We didn't realize that they're having farmer protests, much like their Dutch counterparts. And in these protests, we found New Zealanders referring to themselves as Kiwis. So we're going to take a license and do that too, if that's okay.
Are we allowed
Is that
to
all right?
Our Kiwi friends? And we covered that story on. I mean, in an interview with Ralph Schulhammer right here on the show, we talked about the New Zealand farmers and how it was cascading into New Zealand and not just in the Netherlands. So there's a lot more to this story, not just the farmer piece of this, of course, but government censorship and disinformation campaigns. So something is going wild down in New Zealand. We're also going to look at the very latest on the attacks in Haiti and the U.S. invasion in Haiti. Dan Cohen is going to be joining us from Haiti and bringing us an on-the-ground report there. You don't want to miss that.
Plus, we are going to bring you an update on the peace talks in Ethiopia. There was a handshake. There was an agreement. What can we expect from that? We bring in independent journalist Hermela Aragawi again to bring us an update, and we're excited to talk to her.
Steve in our chat says, "Yep, we're Kiwis. We are Kiwis. We live. Yeah, that's what you call us." And when I went to New Zealand,
that's the thing is, can other people use it? Right?
Can I call you a Kiwi? Oh, I guess if you say it amongst yourselves. I don't know. We'll get to the bottom of that.
I just want to be respectful about using these colloquialisms.
We'll get to the bottom of that. When I went to New Zealand, I brought home a Kiwi bird for my little girl as a gift.
I remember we still have it.
Yes, we do. All right. It's Thursday night. We've got a lot of news to get to. Are you ready to get uncomfortable? Because Redacted starts right now. One of our viewers just said, can you please talk about the United States funding of terrorist groups in the Middle East? And I would love to talk about, we talk about that on a regular basis here on the show. In fact, we've talked all about that as it relates to Ukraine. Of all of the stories we're covering tonight, though, that's not one of them.
No, because
I mean, we're covering so many different stories around the world, but I mention it here because
it weaves through, our topics a lot, but there's no specific news peg for that tonight. Yeah. As far as we know.
So you want to tell us about our newsletter, because the newsletter is rocking and rolling. So to the many thousands of you who are signing up for the newsletter every day, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yes, so make sure that you sign up for the newsletter. It is free. You go to redacted.inc, you put in your email address, and then we will send you an authentication email. You just have to click it. It's as easy as that. And also make sure that you are receiving it regularly, not in your spam or not in your marked dangerous folder. Sometimes Google flags our newsletter as dangerous. It is not. We tried to make it as friendly as possible, just like our show. We bring you the news. A lot of times it's uncomfortable, but we still try and be friendly and approachable.
That's right. Redacted.in.
I did weep once, so
you did?
It's kind of dangerous.
You've weeped?
I weeped once, yes.
You wept?
Do you remember the story that made you weep? It was probably an animal
I
story.
I was sitting there and it had to do with kids. I remember that. So.
Yeah. We try not to make you cry. We try to make you smile a little bit, but there's some horrible stories. I mean, we covered
it's like 95% laughing.
Yes. Okay, good.
I mean, like our top story today in the newsletter was all about Biden's speech last night.
Yeah, there's nothing funny about that.
The dark and thirsty. Like there's dark and thirsty forces that are coming for you. Like,
yeah.
And by the way, this is my final speech. This is my final big pitch to the United States electorate. Come vote for Democrats. There are dark and stormy forces that are coming, and you've got to vote for me because I'm going to protect you. I
snuck in a Friends reference today. Did you catch that? Anytime I can put in any kind of like Friends inside joke, I do it. No,
I didn't see it.
Okay, well, if you got it in the chat, let me know.
Yeah.
All right.
I didn't get it. If anyone gets it, let us know. Maybe we should start doing that, burying something in the newsletter and see if anyone in the chat can figure it out. And then if you figure it out, we will send you a new redacted hoodie. How about that?
Okay. It's deep in there. So
deep in there.
You had to like click a hyperlink to get it, but okay.
All right. Let's get to
I laugh at myself.
Let's start with our top story today, which is these biolabs in Ukraine. Now, Russia wanted to know what biolabs the United States is, what are they developing at these biolabs in Ukraine? Like, this isn't a mystery anymore. Like, we know they exist, much to the chagrin of the Department of Defense in the United States, who tried to cover it up. Yesterday, Russia officially submitted a complaint with the United Nations to expose this secret. What is the United States hiding at these weapons labs? And by the way, stop calling them like friendly weapon or friendly biology labs, like where your friendly high school teacher is going to, have some beakers and some Bunsen burners. Like, that's not what's going on here. What is the United States hiding there? Why are they doing it in Ukraine? And today, the United Nations responded. They got right back to Russia on this question. By the way, China also wanted answers on this. They've been demanding answers on this. Like, what is the United States doing in violation of international law in Ukraine? The United Nations responded this afternoon and says, no, I'm sorry. The United Nations Security Council voted against this probe into the U.S. biolab. So no, I'm sorry. The United States, France, and Britain shut down their calls to investigate the military biological activities in Ukraine. So sorry, not sorry, we're going to do anything on this. The United States Security Council rejected Russia's call for an international investigation. China backed Russia's proposal in all of this. But no, the U.S., Britain, France, we don't want you looking here.
This is outrageous.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I thought, okay, maybe we'll get like a cursory kind of laughable fake investigation like we got from the IAEA looking at the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant.
Or the United Nations report that we did on the Uyghurs recently, how it was like, well, we went there, we didn't see anything, but we still think some bad things are happening.
We Googled some stuff. We looked at Google Earth images.
We bring you some Google Earth images. If you haven't seen that piece, we encourage you to seek it out, the United Nations report on the Uyghurs, because it's full of just holes. It's the sloppiest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I mean, you could literally shoot holes in it from a mile away.
So it's not like we were gonna get something great, right? But maybe they could at least take off the blinders. But this is, by very definition, tunnel vision.
It's awful. I mean, it really is awful. Of course, you'll recall, and we've covered this extensively here on the show, when most major news outlets didn't want to have anything to do with this at all. And if you covered it, you were considered a conspiracy theorist, right? In fact, still today, if you do Google searches around this topic, you will see that there's like PolitiFact and others have like fact check stories about it. Of course, what's funny about those fact check stories is that they were later debunked. So I love to know they're fact checkers from the intelligence state. Of course, you'll recall.
I love the answer where they say mostly false.
Mostly false.
Or mostly true.
Yeah, or they give you 5 Pinocchios out of, like, well, okay, if you're lying a little bit, isn't that make the whole, doesn't your dad have a story about that? Like, if you lie a little bit, then your whole story is bunk, right? Then
yeah. Well, he's like, one lie makes you a liar. And so if you tell me a lie and then I have to go to bat for you later and you're telling me something, how do I know? Right. And so I can't go to bat for you if I know that you have any propensity to lie. So any propensity to lie, it's it's a pee in the pool situation.
Pee in the pool situation. Right. Of course, you'll recall the United States did lie, and they did deny that there were any biolabs in Ukraine. The Department of Defense even called it Russian propaganda. Shut up, don't ask any questions about it at all, said John Kirby, when reporters on March 9th. Now, I went back and I watched this entire press conference today. So if I sound a little pissed off, that's why, because I had to sit through this whole effing press conference to bring you this piece of garbage. Watch.
And on this issue of military biological labs in Ukraine that the Russians keep raising, can you basically explain to us what type of relationship, if any, there was between the Pentagon and the Ukrainian side on any biological labs? When was the last cooperation, and what do you have to say about these Russian accusations?
The Russian accusations are absurd. They're laughable. And, in the words of my Irish Catholic grandfather, a bunch of malarkey. There's nothing to it. It's classic Russian propaganda. And I wouldn't, if I were you, I wouldn't give it a drop of ink worth paying attention to.
Yeah, but can you explain to us has there been any relationship between the Pentagon?
We are not developing biological or chemical weapons inside Ukraine. It's not happening. Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Go ahead.
We are not telling the truth. You are liars. Lying. And this reporter, God bless him, trying to get the answer, wearing a face mask and trying to get the answers to this. No, you're not answering my question. No. Well, no. Okay, move on. We're going to move on to the next question here. We're not going to answer your question. It's total malarkey, as my grandfather used to say. Even though they were on U.S. embassies' websites, including the State Department's websites, which we featured here on the show, then suddenly they were removed from their websites, almost as if they were covering something up. So then, of course, after months of denial about this, the U.S. did finally admit to running Ukraine biolabs. And then, of course, we all remember, or maybe you don't remember, if you I don't know where you were at the time, Grover, my dog Grover remembers, then Senator Marco Rubio asked this question of regime change coup expert Victoria Nuland. Watch.
I only have a minute left. Let me ask you, does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
I'm sure you're aware that the Russian propaganda groups are already putting out there all kinds of information about how they've uncovered a plot by the Ukrainians to release biological weapons in the country and with NATO's coordination. If there's a biological or chemical weapon incident or attack inside of Ukraine, is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
Let me just feed you these questions. Let me feed you these answers.
Okay.
Yeah, it absolutely would be the Russians.
There's no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning to do themselves.
Oh, really? A technique written by you guys, right? I love this. It's a classic Russian technique to blame on the other guys. Really, it comes right out of your playbook, Victoria Nuland.
And so did making sure that the Nord Stream pipeline didn't happen.
I am certain that the Russians were looking.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right. Cool. We believe that.
Right. So Russia, by the way, in pushing for these documents, Russia had documents showing that the Ukrainian health ministry had ordered the destruction of samples of the plague. They're just hanging out with the plague. What'd you do this weekend? Just hanging out with the plague. You want to come over to our house for dinner? They also deleted and ordered the destruction of samples of cholera, which is not a vegetable, anthrax, and other pathogens. So Russia knew this, and this is what Ukraine was ordered to do at these labs, and wanted answers from the United Nations. It seems fair, in the same way that we should probably get a fair investigation into how the United States and the United Kingdom blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. Like, we should know that, but we won't, because we live in a clown world. And new info discovered this week through a Freedom of Information Act request shows that the National Institutes of Health has regular accidents at American biolabs. They go unreported. So, there's this like common thing. We've talked about it here a little bit on the show, which is, there's a common idea that these, lab accidents, they never happen. They're rare. Well, according to new reporting out today, and according to 5,500 documents from the National Institutes of Health, these are government documents through a Freedom of Information Act request at The Intercept. Open this up, and you can read the documents yourself. They're compelling. And what they show is that not only are lab mishaps not rare, they're incredibly common. The world's largest funder of biomedical research, the National Institutes of Health. The agency doesn't just pass on information to the public. Even in cases involving level 3 and level 4 biolab accidents, they keep this stuff hidden. They go to lengths, actually, to keep it hidden from the American people and the world.
Right. That's what Philip has said many times. Philip, our producer, who has worked in many labs, says that even at level 3 of level 4 labs, most likely have leaks on a regular basis. Isn't that what you've said, Philip? Or that most people will get infected with something by working in there for a certain amount of time? Or
were you saying the opposite, saying the propaganda part? No, I'm just joking.
No. It was basically that in the VSL-3 and the VSL-4 labs, the VSL-4 labs especially, because they're working with some pretty potent viruses, that nearly everybody involved in them will get infected with something at some point. That's what was told to me by my molecular virology professor in college. This was like 2010.
Just one sort of anecdote in the story is about how there was one woman working at one of these NIH labs, just like, she's doing an injection on a mouse of a highly, an awful pathogen, and then just nicks her finger.
Yeah.
And then gets incredibly sick and has to be quarantined as a result of it. But we never hear these stories. We never hear these stories. So they're all hidden. So this idea that this stuff doesn't leak and it's all fine and nothing to see here is garbage, according to the National Institutes of Health and their very own documents. They want us to believe that these things are like friendly neighborhood biolabs. Like, come on down, we're going to give you some popsicles and kids can hang out here. We
just make Tylenol, that's all.
Yeah, there's nothing to see here. Yeah, there's the plague in the other room. Don't go in that room. But you should be fine otherwise than that. They say, Washington says, well, because these are on foreign soil, you don't have to worry about it. Right? That these are on foreign soil. And these facilities are used actually to develop weapons. And most of them are, they say, devoted to peaceful purposes, to protect health, humans and animals. And that is malarkey, according to John Kirby.
Coincidentally, outside of U.S. law.
Right. Oh, so they're not on. And this is, you're starting to see a pattern. You're going to see more of a pattern in tonight's show about that thing that David just pointed out, which is, it's brilliant where we can pawn it off on these non-government organizations, right? These NGOs. We can say, look, it wasn't the government. It was this group that we had a contract with. So it's not really us. And yet, meanwhile, that's where all the funding comes from, right? So it's not really the government. It's us funding the government. In the same way when we're in war with all these contractors and you guys see from Halliburton walking around in Blackwater with their hat on backwards and full beards and machine guns. And you're like, who are those guys? They're not part of our military unit. Who are those guys going and killing random civilians? So Russia claimed in March that papers that it forced discovered in Ukraine indicate that U.S. is involved in researching the plague, anthrax, and other deadly pathogens in biolabs outside of the United States. That's what Russia was saying. Hey, United Nations, maybe we should look into this because it's illegal. Just a thought. No, we will not allow you to look into this. We now know, according to the data, that there are 46 U.S. biolabs in Ukraine. 46 of them. China's foreign ministry spokesman said recently that the U.S. must explain its activities and called on it to stop single-handedly opposing the establishment of a verification mechanism for the Biological Weapons Convention, the BWC. So the thing is, America doesn't like being involved in the things that are going to call them out. Like, we don't like being involved in the International Criminal Court. Yeah. So when we want to bring up war crimes, then because we're not a part of it, then we can't be brought up on war crimes charges.
But they like, Western powers like 10 or whatever.
Right.
Well, that's
the Pac-10 football.
What is that?
It's a college football.
Isn't there a
Pac-10? The Big East.
I don't know. What's the opposite of? Anyway.
Yeah. But they go to these summits instead of actually being a part of anything.
Right. And in these summits, they establish these organizations like the United Nations or the even OPEC was established through the summitry around oil in the 70s. So when it serves them, there is absolutely a purpose to this. But for this, which brings about accountability, no summitry.
And meanwhile, a Ukrainian journalist was the person that broke a big part of this story. Ukrainian journalist was like, why are there U.S. bioweapons labs in my home country in Ukraine? So this wasn't Russian propaganda, wasn't U.S. propaganda, it wasn't any it was Ukraine saying, wait a second, what a Ukrainian journalist saying a big part of the story. Hey, what are these things doing in my backyard? In fact, his name, Alexander Rogers, broke the story. Why are there U.S. weapons labs in his home country, he wrote. He exposed the American company Black & Veatch with their Special Projects Corporation, BV for short, that they were behind the project and financed by the U.S. Department of Defense. Oh. According to his reporting, the plant is located in the basement of the Institutes of Experimental Medicine and Veterinary Department. All of its employees are foreigners, mostly Americans, under the guise of laboratory tests, experiments based on the use of lethal pathogens on the battlefield. And those tests are carried out in Ukraine at these labs, he found. A Ukrainian journalist found that out and then confirmed separately. As we recently reported on Redacted in 2014, a firm called Biota, which specializes in detecting, tracking, and analyzing potential disease outbreaks, signed an $18 million federal contract as a subcontractor for Black & Veatch.
Incidentally, do you know who was involved in financing both of those companies?
Who?
Hunter Biden was connected to both of those companies through.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So, of course. So Black & Veatch, Meadow Biodata, was started with the help of U.S. President Joe Biden, his son, Hunter Biden, and his investment firm, Rosemont Seneca Technologies Partner, which he founded alongside John Kerry's stepson in 2009. So isn't it a little too convenient? By the way, what does Hunter Biden know about energy or deadly pathogens that he's involved in these companies that are doing experimental battlefield bioweapons testing in Ukraine? Like, what is if you look at his laundry list of his resume, you look at Hunter Biden's CV, I guess as they call it in England.
Well, I wouldn't pretend to know what his expertise is. But it does seem to me that he has some hangers-ons who will, is that how you use the plural of that? Hangers-ons who, come around him and say, how about this, how about this, how about this? And because of his connections, that is my read on the situation. I don't know. So I've never tried to hire him for something. Know
I don't know
about his CV, but we sure know about his CP, if you know what I'm saying. Wink, wink. Nudge, nudge.
I don't get it.
CP? No. Anyone?
See, you don't want to know. You don't want to nudge, nudge.
You don't want to
nudge, nudge.
I'm not going to Google that.
If I have a nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
Okay.
Little Monty Python reference for you. So in 2014, Meta Biota, the EHA, and the Wuhan Institute of Virology, try to say that 5 times fast, or in my case, try to say it at all and you'll fail, were all named as researchers in a study on infectious diseases deriving from Chinese bats. You can't even make this up. So Hunter Biden's company, Meta Biota, was involved in the Chinese bat infectious disease research. Sound familiar? It's amazing. So what's interesting and not surprising is that the United States contracts with private companies. So your taxpayers will pay for the bioweapons being developed in Ukraine, but the U.S. State Department gets to say that no government agency has bioweapons labs in Ukraine, and we're not involved in it because these are non-government entities and we don't have anything to do with it. So they do all the heavy lifting and we don't have, plausible deniability.
But not if we've had it on our own State Department, then no.
Right.
And if Victoria Nuland said that they existed, but they were a friendlier version of what we were trying to derive from them, then no. Then we've been told they exist, and then we're being gaslit.
Right.
So it's very rude.
We've got more news to get to here on this Thursday night. We're going to have Dr. Shiva joining us in just moments. It's going to be unbelievable. We're going to get into details about this government cover-up and the censorship at big tech companies, his lawsuit that broke the story wide open. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to look at New Zealand gone crazy and what is happening to that country. We're also going to dive into the latest from Haiti. We're going to go to Port-au-Prince. Dan Cohen, we sent Dan Cohen down there to see what's happening, and there's violence erupting as we speak, gunfire at some of the blockades, so we will be bringing you that story. But first, we have a daily newsletter that I would love for all of you to subscribe to. Very simple to do. Just go to redacted.inc. You can sign up for the newsletter by putting your email address in there. Boom. And then you get the newsletter delivered to your inbox first thing in the morning.
And we had a super chat, someone who was guessing the Friends reference. And yes, it was Phoebe running. So thank you to that person.
Oh, right. Okay, I didn't click on it. So you got to confirm your email when you get it into your inbox. And then you will get that email first thing in the morning. So all you need to do is go to redacted.inc. Well, 2 years ago, a man by the name of Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai exposed deep collusion between the United States government and social media companies, specifically Twitter, went beyond that, though, to YouTube, to Google. And the mainstream media ignored the story. Some independent media picked up on the story, like the Gateway Pundit, etc., but no one else really covered the story. At the time, he was running for Senate in the state of Massachusetts, and he tweeted some information that the Secretary of State's office in the state of Massachusetts didn't like. When he tweeted, he was then shut down on Twitter, banned, deplatformed. Well, a lawsuit unfolded, and what he discovered was deep collusion between government entities and social media companies with a backdoor portal that allows government employees to basically censor and deplatform anyone they like. This was just the tip of the iceberg. And then, of course, more documents unfolded during these court proceedings. And again, the mainstream media largely ignored the story. And then this week, we hear from The Intercept, which drops a bombshell story, and people start paying attention. And The Intercept published a report detailing a similar portal at Facebook. But Dr. Shiva broke this story first 2 years ago, and again, the mainstream media largely ignored this story. And Dr. Shiva joins us now. Doctor, welcome to the show. Last night on the show, a bunch of our viewers said, hey, thank you for giving credit to Dr. Shiva for having originally broken this story, and we wanted to have you on the show because there's a lot more here to talk about. Did I get that timeline correct?
You did. One of the important things to understand, I was running for a federal office for U.S. Senate, not for state Senate, for U.S. Senate. And this is very important to understand because there are fundamental laws which were put into place going back to a law called USC 52-20701, which says that for a federal office, every state is supposed to preserve all documents in connection with the federal election. So the tweet that I did, Clayton was bringing out the malfeasance of the Secretary of State relative to them violating that law. That led, as you just shared, with my deplatforming. One of the important things that occurred was after that deplatforming, I didn't sit still, Clayton. I had to file my own lawsuit. No lawyer in Massachusetts really wanted to take on the government. And I represented myself in federal court. And in the first part of the federal court case, I had a major victory, which again, none of the news media covered. On October 30th, 2020, Tucker Carlson knew about it. Mainstream media knew about it. In fact, people at The Intercept were notified, and they did nothing. And why was that first lawsuit important? Because in that lawsuit, again, this is in a federal court, myself and the judge cross-examined the social media director at the Secretary of State, and she admitted that they have this portal between government and, in this case, Twitter. And that portal was exercised on me, a U.S. Senate federal candidate, because they didn't like what I was saying. After that, the judge ordered them to put me back on Twitter. When I'm back on Twitter the second time on February 1st, 2021, I'm again deplatformed because I share the findings of this architecture, okay? That led into the judge saying he wanted Twitter to come into the courtroom. So now it's me against 7 lawyers. 3 from Twitter, 3 from the Secretary of State, and 1 from an organization called NACID. The night before that lawsuit hearing in May, I discover what are called playbooks, detailed manuals created at Harvard, originally created in Britain, which lay out the actual step-by-step way in how government will surveil U.S. citizens, not only U.S. citizens, for that matter, citizens anywhere in the world, and has a methodology for rating them as high, medium, and low severity, and then deplatforming them and continually surveilling them. So first, I was deplatformed first for exposing government malfeasance, and then I was watched and I was thrown off because I exposed this architecture. Now, one of the most important things is that what we discovered in the May hearing was the playbooks and the entire details of the technology architecture between government and Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, the players involved, the manuals, and the entire thing. And this was put into a beautiful network diagram, which was presented in court and accepted as evidence in court. What the DHS leaks guys put out of The Intercept is a dribble. It's frankly very disappointing. And this is something that occurs in academia, where someone will do the deep research of the entire iceberg, and someone will conceal that, delay it, and release it later on, not only to take credit, but to confuse people about the depth of what's taking place. And I say this particular here, Clayton, is because in the diagram that we put out of the entire censorship architecture that we had discovered, one of the main players in that diagram who helped create this architecture, funded it, and was an architect of it, is Pierre Omidyar. Pierre Omidyar is a billionaire who started eBay. He's also the one who funded this architecture. So let me repeat that. Pierre Omidyar, billionaire, funded a significant portion of the censorship architecture through a nonprofit that he owns called Democracy Fund. Well, guess what else who else Pierre Omidyar funded? He funded The Intercept. He funded The Intercept, which has this aura of doing, amazing investigative journalism. So DHS leaks is dribble of the reality of the massive architecture and the fact that people like Pierre Omidyar create The Intercept, an organ claiming therefore investigative reporting, but Pierre Omidyar is the one who helped create that censorship architecture. And these two reporters who probably want to win the Pulitzer have not even talked about their boss helped create that architecture they're supposedly doing DHS leaks. So I find it...
So there's no mention of you in this Intercept piece.
Zero. And it's called plagiarism. In academia, we would call that, at minimum, lack of citation. We will call it unethical. And the reason this occurs, this is a process of how the mainstream media works. It's a give. They know the crime was committed. The person committing the crime also owns reporters who will report on the crime. And you've seen this many, many times in history. So they can control the narrative and then distract people over here. Oh, The Intercept is our source. Tucker Carlson is our source. When the reality is we were the source, and that content, the playbooks, the architecture, everything has been up on the website for 2 years. And you can go back in 2020 and 2021. A lot of very good independent media, Gateway Pundit and others covered this. And the process here that has unfolded is a process that the government actually uses, which is first they conceal the actual whole truth. They delay 2 years. They steal the information. They hijack it and put out a dribble. And that is what is the nuance, but the real story here. The Intercept owner, Pierre Omidyar, also is the one who funded this censorship network.
Did The Intercept reach out to you at all about this story?
Zero. Nothing. So people really need to recognize intelligence agencies are very clever at doing this. They have this process of where they own both sides of the equation. And we've seen this. It's called getting ahead of the story in PR, right? You've seen politicians, they do something horrible, and then they'll say, oh, yeah, their PR guys will get ahead of the story. They release a little bit, and people feel, oh, we have democracy in America. No, the reality here is that the First Amendment has completely been destroyed. People like Pierre Omidyar, who owns The Intercept, have created the censorship infrastructure in the United States. And that censorship infrastructure was unleashed on a U.S. Senate federal candidate in Massachusetts. And I'm very grateful that you brought that up. You put the origin, you quoted the Gateway Pundit story. It's time that independent media get its actual credit. And we recognize that most of the intelligence agencies have infiltrated American media, including organizations like The Intercept, in my view. New York Times has been written about for many, many years. What we need to understand is that this process of the whole truth, concealing it, delaying it, stealing it, and hijacking it, and giving a dribble of the truth is a process, Clayton, that has historically occurred in many, many fields. Big academia does this to small academics. There'll be some guy in a state school who finds a major discovery. The big academics will not cover that guy. Years later, they'll write about it, never cite him. It's called plagiarism. And why do they do this? Because money is involved in this case, views, right? But more importantly, they want to hold their stature as a source of quote unquote truth. So in this case, The Intercept, this is a big story. It wasn't uncovered by a journalist. It was uncovered by an engineer, by a U.S. Senate candidate representing the people of Massachusetts. Now, that is a bigger truth because it says that ordinary people do the hard work, not these quote unquote journalists who do it when it's convenient for them and want to own the narrative. And again, I repeat, Pierre Omidyar is the founder, the funder of The Intercept. Pierre Omidyar is the one who funded, through the Democracy Fund, the censorship infrastructure, which we have in courtroom documents. So it's time that people wake up. How can you own both sides?
Right. And of course, we've had former members of the CIA explaining that process to us on our very show, explaining owning both sides of that story. So there's a long history here. It's part of their playbook. Can you talk about these playbooks specifically? And what did you uncover the night before you had to go back and appear before this judge? Can you walk me through, first of all, who were the authors specifically of this playbook infrastructure? What did it show, and what were sort of the steps people could do to deplatform individuals using this playbook?
Yeah, great. So remember, in the preliminary injunction, the social media director said, oh, we have this partner support portal, okay? This VIP access. And when I was getting ready for my May hearing, I couldn't find anything about the partner support portal. So I researched. At 12 midnight, the night before my hearing, I find a set of documents on a server in Britain written by a woman who was talking about the general counsel at Twitter, talking about this partner support portal they'd created so the UK government could use it to censor UK citizens. That led me to a server at Harvard, at the Harvard Belfer School, where I found all of these playbooks, about 5 of them. What do these playbooks show? What are they? Playbooks. They're actual manuals for censorship in very anodyne terms. So they call the people that they want to censor influence operators, U.S. citizens, or it could be anyone. People of influence like myself, people get a lot of tweets. By the way, I had no bots as my Twitter accounts, right? My followers. All my Twitter, I would do a tweet, Clayton, and I would get 30,000 retweets, okay? Massive traction with 400,000 followers. So in this playbook, first of all, they say, how do you identify someone who should be surveilled? They have a methodology. One of those is someone who says politicians or state officials are corrupt. That's a red flag. This is what I was doing, talking about government malfeasance. So that then goes to Playbook 2. Playbook 2 literally lays out a 4-step process, 4 stages. Step 1, identify those people. Step 2, categorize them into severity stages. And in that categorization, they actually have a step-by-step method. Do they have credibility? What is their volume? Do they get traction? Per that step, they have another section in the playbook which says how you rate them, low, medium, or high severity. I was rated as high severity. And when you're rated as high severity, you're watched once, which I was in the first time, and then you're continually watched using algorithms, which is why when we went into court the second time, I told the judge, they didn't honor your order because they didn't tell you that they have algorithms. Once I was put on their surveillance, I was continuing to be watched. So the playbook says you continually watch them and then you eventually deplatform them. It's a step-by-step guide. And it's barely laid. Who are the authors? Guess who the authors were? All my defendants in my case, Twitter, the Secretary of State, and NASID were all saying, oh, we don't know each other. They're on the front page of the playbook, Clayton. Their names are right there, Twitter legal, and the defendants' names are there in black and white.
So what did the judge say when you told them that? They're saying here now in front of you, Your Honor, that they don't know each other. In fact, they came together and authored this playbook together. Clearly, they know each other. What did the judge say to you?
So I held up the playbooks in my opening statement, and I said, Your Honor, they've all lied to you. All these defendants know each other. And he was flabbergasted. Okay, this is only supposed to be a 2-hour hearing in May. It ended up becoming a 2-day hearing. The next morning, the judge comes in, and everyone can go explore it. Any investigative journalists at The Intercept, if they're truly investigative journalists, versus saying they're investigative journalists. But in those transcripts, on the second day of May, the judge said, I got up at 6 a.m. and I reviewed all of Dr. Shiva's evidence. He goes, this lawsuit will be taught in every constitutional law class. Now, he's a Harvard-trained, Yale-trained lawyer appointed by Reagan. All right? So that's what happened. And it's an explosive lawsuit, and we did it on our own. In fact, my lawsuit was so well done, the vice chairman of Wilmer & Hale, one of the number one law firms in the world, which represents Twitter, couldn't believe I did my own lawsuit. She said I had shadow counsel. That's how good my stuff was, Clayton. It wasn't like crap work. I had learned how to write briefs. So the point is, again, Tucker Carlson knew about this. Independent media was getting it out there. The mainstream media concealed it, delayed it, and purposely did nothing. What we exposed in May was the entire architecture, not just this little 4 or 5 slides that the DHS leaks did. I'm talking about how the entire architecture, the portal that Twitter used, the portal that Facebook used, and it's all in those playbooks. And then in June of 2021, another 300-page report, which we also documented, gets released by Stanford, funded by the Atlantic Council, funded also by Pierre Omidyar, funded by Stanford. And that long fuse report validates the playbooks, and it lays out all the players, one of them being Microsoft, which is all the DHS leaks guys talk about, which was already in our diagram, Masterson, that they talk about. So it is reprehensible. These people are not journalists. The Intercept is not the investigative journalist. That's what they want to project as. Omidyar wants to project that. Meanwhile, he's freaking creating the censorship infrastructure.
And Glenn Greenwald, who founded The Intercept, quit over censorship and left The Intercept.
I told this to Glenn, email Glenn, because you look, one of my mentors is a guy called Noam Chomsky, okay? And Noam said you should contact Glenn. Nothing from Glenn. I mean, all these guys just want to win awards? Do they not want to give small guys credit? Does it have to be them? Is this what this is about? I think that's one part of it, because they want to get all the views. But the other part of it is we have to recognize that the intelligence agencies are running American media. And this has been talked about many, many times.
Oh, right.
And I think we're seeing, at least in China or in other countries, people say, oh, yeah, the government watches us, they own it. But in America, we're taught to believe, oh, the government is here and big tech is over here. But what they've done, as we found out in the Long Fuse report, and in the lawsuit we brought up, they explicitly say that the government knows that they cannot censor Americans domestically, so they wanted to fill in the gaps with non-governmental agencies. You see, at the in-between, so they could launder the censorship. Well, the Center for Internet Security, which Pierre Omidyar funded, is that NGO. Everyone should go research Pierre Omidyar, what he has done in Ukraine, what the news organizations. Who is this guy? And by the way, he's the one who bought PayPal. So it's time people wake up and recognize that the First Amendment, why my parents came here, Clayton, we were lower caste Indians, you didn't have all the rights. We came here because of the First Amendment. And the First Amendment has been destroyed. Forget about Make America Great Again. It's about we got to win back freedom. So the bottom line is this. What I've uncovered out of all of this is that the only way that working people in this country, or for that matter in the world, are going to win is we need to build a bottoms-up movement, Clayton.
Right.
When you look at the arc of American history, it's never come top down. If you go look at the 1800s and the 1900s, it's when people awakened, bottoms up, independent of left or right. And we stop outsourcing our stuff, be it Obama or Trump or Bernie Sanders. We have to rebuild a bottoms-up movement. And what I've done since the campaign is at truthfreedomhealth.com. I've taken all that knowledge, a curriculum we've created. We've created our own social media portals for people to privately interact. And we've created a global community now where we want to educate people to think beyond left and right. We want to educate people to think systems and not rely on mainstream media. Build bottoms-up independent media. This is a very adolescent way of thinking left or right, or pro or anti.
I love it. And I'll make sure we have a link to that in our show description so people can take action on that. Very, very important work that you're doing on that regard. Before I get you out of here, Doctor, I want to talk about this letter that you wrote last night to Elon Musk, because at this hour, these infrastructures still exist. You know, Elon Musk talks about free speech and getting away from censorship, and this is going to be a platform of town square where everyone has an opportunity to speak and not be deplatformed. And yet this portal that you uncovered still exists. What did you say in your letter to Elon Musk last night?
Well, I try to keep it brief. The post I did was, because I'm not on Twitter, I told people, take this letter and, tag and post Elon Musk. The letter fundamentally said, hey, Elon, in 2 paragraphs, I said, look, I was deplatformed in 2020 by the government. And then when I exposed the censorship infrastructure, I was permanently deplatformed. And I, respectfully asked him to restore me because I'm planning on running against Elizabeth Warren again. And I directed him to winbackfreedom.com, where we have all of the details of the censorship architecture. And I also pointed out DHS leaks is dribble compared to what we discovered. So if Elon Musk, as he has stated, is committed to truly free speech, more importantly, the First Amendment, okay, then the first thing that needs to happen is guys like me should be first put on so we can start talking about this. But more importantly, this censorship infrastructure needs to be completely destroyed. And if he's not going to do that, then he is actually supporting government. He's serving as an agent of government.
Right.
And that is what people need to understand. If Elon Musk is serious, then he needs to read our lawsuit, look at that architecture, and recognize his former quote-unquote colleague, Pierre Omidyar, who bought PayPal, is a guy who set this up. And the DHS leaks is, frankly, diversion. It's dribble.
Right. Well, we invited on the journalists from The Intercept who wrote that piece. They told us they were too busy. One of the journalists told us they were too busy. They were slammed. They couldn't appear on our show. And the other journalist, we learned, is sick. That's what we've been told from The Intercept. So we'll keep our audience updated if they'd like to come on and speak on their side of the story and why they covered a portion of it and why there's no mention of you or Pierre Omidyar in the article, in the piece. It would be fascinating. Dr. Shiva, thank you.
I think The Intercept should do an investigative report on Pierre Omidyar, their own founder. They should hold a big mirror up to themselves and see what that reveals.
Wouldn't that be amazing? I would love to see that. Yeah, that would be amazing. Now, that would be some journalism. That would be some ballsy journalism right there.
The journalists, Clayton, are you and I. That, when they said the freedom of the press of founders, and they created systems like the Postal Service early on, it wasn't about the New York Times. It was you and I were the press.
Right.
If you go back and read the founders, in 1787, the Postal Service was created as a quote unquote internet of the time. So you and I could be the press and share information. It's a longer discussion we can have.
Right.
But the freedom of the press was you and I to be journalists. So forget Tucker Carlson, forget The Intercept. They're all part of the machine. And that's what the DHS leaks shows compared to what we did back in 2020.
Well, Dr. Shiva, we appreciate you joining us, sharing this unbelievable story. And I mean, it is believable. Once you dive into the documents, as I have, it's remarkable. So I would encourage our audience to check out. We'll have links in the description below. What's the best website for people to go and learn more?
So first, I would recommend go to winbackfreedom.com if you want to see all the documents. If you want to go to my personal website to understand my journey to systems, go to vashiva.com. And finally, what's the solution? The solution is you getting educated or being enslaved. Go to truthfreedomhealth.com. Truthfreedomhealth.com. We have a course, we have a community, but we want to build a bottoms-up movement. But you have to learn the physics, the science of systems, which Pierre Omidyar knows, which Henry Kissinger knows, which Condoleezza Rice knows, right? All these people understand. It's time that everyday people have the fire of the science of systems so they can liberate themselves.
Have the keys.
So
exactly.
3 websites, winbackfreedom.com, vashiva.com, and truthfreedomhealth.com.
All right, we'll have those in the show description, Doc. Great to see you. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and we'll have you back real soon.
Thank you, Clayton. I'm glad you do all the work you do with this independent journalism. Great work.
Thank you so much. And of course, we're going to see him running for, thank you, the Doc, for joining us. We're going to see him running against Elizabeth Warren in Massachusetts. That should be one smoking.
If they let us.
Well, if they let him.
If they let us see him or hear him or anything like that.
Isn't it amazing? So many people in the chat were saying, go Dr. Shiva, like, who loves America, loves, and it's amazing to think that here someone can be deplatformed, taken down, and silenced by these government bodies in total cahoots with these big tech companies. And he's right about Elon Musk having this backdoor portal that's available. By the way, he's still not allowed back on Twitter yet.
Yeah, that's outrageous too. If you search around for, there's still a conversation about him he's not allowed to participate in.
Yeah, he can't participate in his own conversation because someone at the government decided to block him from being a part of it.
Yeah.
It's just outrageous. So
I noticed from the chat that we have a lot of cross viewers. A lot of you say that you do watch his YouTube show as well. And so that's super interesting. We encourage you to continue to let him speak while he is still platformed on some places.
Yeah, very few news organizations covered it. Some people were saying the Gray Zone covered it. I can't find any mention of Dr. Shiva on the Gray Zone. Gray Zone is one of the few independent journalist organizations that I proudly would support any day of the week. The work that Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate do over there, and Kit Clarenberg, they're amazing. So those journalists at the Gray Zone and the Gateway Pundit actually covered the story. But mainstream media does not want to touch this stuff. They just do not want to get their hands in it.
Because how do you start here, right? Like, they can't sort of start here. They're too far through the looking glass.
Like, they're going to go ask their billionaire bosses, can I go cover this other billionaire that you just probably had lunch with yesterday?
Right.
Who's probably funding all of this and who's secretly also funding these government programs. And you can't. As Noam Chomsky points out, you can't. If you are involved in those organizations, you can't you can't be free of that bias. It's impossible.
And you can't read news in this way.
There's probably a chain that every one of their scripts probably has to go through this chain of command of approval before it actually goes on the teleprompter. Like, there's no way that they're not looking at every single thing they say, because there are some journalists that have gone off the rails and gone off prompter, and they're immediately fired.
Right. Or they wait until they're about to quit that day. Remember that? Was that a news reporter up in Alaska? She went on like her last day and she's like, I'm going to go about marijuana. And she's like, bye. Yeah. They wait till the last moment to like make their
Bruce Almighty.
Bruce Almighty, or what's his? No, it was Liar Liar, right?
No, it was Bruce Almighty.
Bruce Almighty. Oh yeah, that's right.
Back to you, effers.
That's right. Oh.
That's how we're gonna introduce every story. Back to you, Clayton. Back to you, effer.
No, I am surprised on the Glenn Greenwald piece of this too. I have a lot of respect for Glenn's reporting. I'm surprised that he didn't get back to him on this. And look, a lot of times, we get flooded with tons of stories on a regular basis. We don't have a huge team, so it's all in many ways. And I'm not making excuses for anybody. It's hard sometimes to kind of sift through it. And be able to be able to sit down clearly. Oh, you've sent me 5,000 documents this afternoon. Let me sit down and slowly start to go through it. But this is different. Glenn understands this. He also worked at The Intercept at the time. He was working at The Intercept. So I'll let Glenn speak for himself on this. I think he's an amazing reporter, and he's done a lot of great work. And
he certainly doesn't seem to shy away from poking people.
No,
he's fine with that.
He doesn't have a problem like stirring the pot.
But he is in the middle of covering the Brazilian election, which we have received many.
But he was referring to this 2 years ago. What Dr. Shiva is talking about is back 2 years ago.
Oh, I thought you meant that he...
No.
I misunderstood. I thought he was wondering why Glenn Greenwald would not attack this Intercept angle.
Right. No. I think he's talking like 2 years ago when they had the story. Like,
maybe
why?
He still will then after the election dies down in Brazil. If that happens, we have been receiving your emails about that. We thank you for the context. And we will continue to follow that story as well.
So we've got more news to get to here on the show. We are going to talk about what's unfolding in New Zealand in just moments, because many of our New Zealand viewers have said, please cover this story. It's an absolute shit show down there, what's happening with their government. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to look at the latest on Haiti. We will be going to Port-au-Prince with Dan Cohen, who's going to be joining us from Port-au-Prince to bring the very latest on the violence and the coming U.S. invasion, because there's already troubling signs that it's already started. So we'll get to that. We're also going to look at peace in Ethiopia. which is really, really exciting. But all right, let's talk about New Zealand, because New Zealand has gone absolutely crazy. Now, it's a beautiful place. The people are very great, but their government is growing increasingly fascist, draconian, and doing some things that need our attention here on Redacted.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because New Zealand has this international reputation of being popular. Because they were known as a COVID success story. They had draconian lockdowns. They had zero COVID for a long time. Their prime minister was always on camera. But there are things that are happening there that are very disenfranchising to everyday people that are worth talking about. For instance, farmers in New Zealand are continuing to protest crackdowns on their industry, much like the Dutch farmers. New Zealand has proposed strict measures on farmers in pursuit of their Zero Carbon Act 2030. Bjorn Lundberg and other climate researchers talk about how many of these countries just kind of picked a year out of their hat, and emissions it wasn't really based on science. They just said, let's lower carbon by this much by this year. And it became something nice to talk about on the campaign trail. But so why are they doing that? Why by this year? These proposals are meant to reduce methane by that time frame. Again, these are proposals, so they are still open for consultation, but that's why the protests are happening now during this consultation period, because farmers are letting it be known that these proposals will harm them. Listen.
The government wants to introduce an emissions tax that will, on its own numbers, rip 20% of sheep and beef sector's production and 6% of dairy sector's production. Look around you. Every fifth farmer you see here today will be gone by 2030.
Wow.
And the ones left will be under immense pressure and strain.
So I just want to, because maybe some of our viewers had a hard time hearing him. 1 out of every 5 farms will be gone.
Yes.
Gone.
And the who is left is under immense strain, which makes it kind of comical because the government is saying, under this new regulation, there would be tax on farmers based on their estimated methane and nitrous oxide gas generated by their livestock herds, starting in 2025. So really soon here, right? So you're going to have to look left and look right and decide which cow do you keep. Payments would come due every 1 to 3 years, and every farmer who reached a certain threshold for herd size and fertilizer use would be affected. And the government is saying that farmers will recoup this money by charging more for environmentally friendly products, which is comical.
Come on, really?
You're not. In this economy, no.
So
absolutely not.
I'm going to buy a grain or a grass-fed sheep milk soap bar, and that's going to lower emit like
you're a chicken farmer and you decide to make organic chicken pillows because you have to you have to think of a new business
organic
in order to
pillows.
Do this with the feathers.
Oh, okay.
I meant I don't know. I'm bullshitting.
Maybe you're onto
here.
something there. Maybe you're onto something.
Right. I know nothing, Jon Snow.
Sheep pillows.
But the government says that this will help farmers recycle revenue back into their sector in order to invest in new technology, research, and initiatives to farm in a new way. And the farmers are saying, no, that's not how this is going to work. They say this is an effort by the government to brag internationally about what they can do and not actually help the environment. Listen.
Why are they doing this? Well, really it seems to have been done so the Prime Minister and the Climate Change Minister can go and attend Me Too meetings around the world and stand on the podium and effectively say, mine's bigger than yours. And it doesn't matter if the government process or the Wed partnership model was there. Putting millions into a fund for research sounds really good, but it's going to attract salaries. And the bit that comes out the bottom will probably be spent on research. We've already spent $200 billion so far on research and came up with virtually nothing except the fact that we might be able to breed animals that are more efficient.
So kind of hard to hear because of the background noise. Can you sum up what he's saying there?
So he's saying basically these goals are arbitrary, which is true. And they're doing this so that they can go around to Me Too meetings and say, mine's bigger than yours. Like my cuts my emissions targets. And basically they're saying that this will save all kinds of money and we'll put it into research. And he says, we've been spending money on research and all we've found is that maybe we can breed more efficient animals. I'm not exactly sure what that means, if that means biolab type meat or something like that. But he's like, we're not getting there. And they make the point that why target us for emissions? There are so many other industries you can target. Why start with us? And in fact, he's right. So when he talks about New Zealand's history of investing in clean energy, let's just look back at the next decade. Now, this comes again from Bjorn Lomborg's great book, False Alarm. And he talks about the fact that New Zealand was actually the first country in the world to promise to go carbon neutral, and also the first country to have spectacularly failed, and the first to promise for a second time to try to achieve the same thing. So we're living it. The first time didn't go so well. We're in the second time. So he mentions in 2007, Prime Minister Helen Clark declared that she wanted to be carbon neutral by 2020. We've been there. It's come and gone. New Zealand not only failed to achieve the vision, but also failed to reduce any emissions. The latest 2019 official statistics show that the country's total emission will be higher in 2020 than they were when Ms. Clark's ambition was declared. And New Zealand is on track to be a whopping 123% off the Prime Minister's vision. Yet in 2018, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern re-upped the pledge, promising to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, and was able to pass legislation for exactly that goal in 2019. And did it help? And will it help? Like, if that were actually achieved, what would that do for the rest of us, for the planet, for New Zealand? Well, he plays that out. He says, if we assume that New Zealand will actually deliver on its net zero promise in 2050 and stick to it throughout the rest of the century, the total amount of greenhouse gas reduction will, according to the standard estimate from the UN's climate panel, deliver a temperature reduction in the year 2100 of 0.004 degrees Fahrenheit. Given the expected temperature increase by around 2100, this means that New Zealand going net zero by 2050 will postpone the warming we expected to see on January 1st, 2100 by about 3 weeks. So that's nice. Hurt those farmers for that extra 3 weeks.
So crush the farmers, run those people out of business. I mean, this is all part of the takeover, right? This is all part of the Davos plan, the World Economic Forum plan to consolidate power, take over people's farms, run these people out of business, get them away from processing meat, get them onto these plant-based garbage, products, and control everyone. And of course, New Zealand was a test bed for this. I mean, New Zealand and Australia. A lot of people, similarities here, but we see a lot of Australian viewers too. And there's a lot of similarities, of course. But these two were like Petri dish test beds for COVID lockdowns and government control. And
yes, we're going to talk about that in a second, actually, because the question remains, why do this? Is it just to continue disenfranchising people and taking away what they have? Well, it does sure seem like it. The two gentlemen we just played you, they come from a group called Groundswell New Zealand, and they claim that the government is actually using climate change to take farmers' land. Here's a letter that one farmer received in July telling them that the state is going to take their land because it has use case interest for them, basically. They're going to, pay them what they think is commensurate. And they say that 1,500 such landowners have received letters like this. Now, you may be wondering, why haven't you heard about this? Especially because, like I said, New Zealand is popular. It got a lot of press during the pandemic because Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was considered a pandemic hero by the mainstream media for pandemic lockdowns and travel bans.
Oh, CNN loved her, and people referenced her all the time. There was a lot of commentary about what
happens when you take it seriously, when you put vaccine mandates in place, when you lock down borders. They had anyway, well, maybe because she's also so strict on information is another reason that you haven't heard about this.
I was wondering.
When addressing the United Nations recently, she said that online speech is a weapon and should be regulated like a weapon by all politicians. Listen.
After all, the face of war has changed, and with that, the weapons used. The tools used to challenge the statehood of others are hidden and more complex. Traditional combat, espionage, and the threat of nuclear weapons are now accompanied by cyber attacks, prolific disinformation, and manipulation of whole communities and societies. Now, as leaders, we have never treated the weapons of old in the same way as those that have emerged. And that's understandable. After all, a bullet takes a life. A bomb takes out a whole village. A lie online or from a podium does not. But what if that lie, told repeatedly and across many platforms, prompts, inspires, or motivates others to take up arms, to threaten the security of others, to turn a blind eye to atrocities, or worse, to become complicit in them? What then? This is no longer a hypothetical. The weapons of war have changed. They are upon us and require the same level of action and activity that we put into the weapons of old.
Weapons. And then right after that speech, I just learned she went and had a wine and cheese hour with Justin Trudeau.
Oh, okay. Too popular if you're talking about Western media. I see your comments in the chat. When I said that she was popular, the chat kind of freaked out. I know that that is not universally felt, but if you were reading New York Times, if you were watching the Western media, if you were watching mainstream media, you would think that they were popular. No, because what they you said, are, what I mean is pandemic stars in the way that, I don't know, Andrew Cuomo, right, was a pandemic star.
Well, you don't need to qualify. What you were saying is that the Western media tried to play her up as some big hero.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Like, put her on the cover of Time magazine. See what she did in New Zealand.
Absolutely, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So what is she saying here? Does any of this scare you? Because it scares me. She's saying words are more dangerous than weapons, and her words. So, like, what are those words?
Right. So her words are fine, apparently.
Yeah.
Unless I'm missing something, Philip and David, you guys can check. I mean, her words are fine, but your words repeated enough times could be the equivalent of a nuclear bomb.
I mean, her words locked down children and elderly people, and people did die from lockdowns too.
Right.
So how come her words shouldn't be challenged? Those are kind of like nukes. For some people, they were.
Absolutely they were.
So punishable, and then punishable by what? Because in New Zealand, illegal possession of a firearm is punishable by jail time. So are we going to start punishing commensurately for words the government doesn't like? You see where I'm extrapolating here? You don't have to play this out too far to get to a very dangerous place.
Right.
And we don't even know the extent of the damage her words have done just yet, because that's all still coming to fruition.
Yes,
we're learning things every day.
Right, absolutely.
Well, I'm just curious too, because New Zealand has become now the popular place for billionaires to go and build their end of days bunkers. You know, Peter Thiel is building a bunker there. Other billionaires are building bunkers in New Zealand on the hillside overlooking Queenstown and other places there. And so it seems like, of course, there's a reason they are, right? It's to keep the riffraff away. It's to have compliant people nearby, people who, won't uprise, won't cause problems, are going to be under this sort of draconian laws by this government. So you'll have a fully compliant sort of sheep population to make sure that these billionaires are fine.
Do we know where hobbits fall on all this? Has anybody polled them?
No, you can go to Hobbiton. Yeah, when I went to New Zealand, I wanted to go to Hobbiton, and they're very compliant, the hobbits.
Yes, right.
I was wondering where they.
That's the whole.
Right.
The whole thing.
They're agreeable.
They're very compliant. They are agreeable, and they're adorable. But these words, like the idea that we can't, and who is going to tell us what speech is allowed? I mean, you're seeing a theme here, right? But these government entities, these governments that are...
Well, we can get a clue based on what social media allows us to say,
right,
given that it's, the blind leading the blind with social media and the government.
Well, we've heard from so many New Zealand viewers who've said, thank you for your show. We can't get any of this type of news here in New Zealand. And the same as Australia. I just saw a message from an Australian viewer that said, wow, this is the first time learning about this. But then again, I live in Australia and I'm not allowed to find this stuff out. Like we're censored.
We're not either, though. We're
true.
not allowed to find it in the U.S. either, except for shows like this. Like, you're not going to find this on mainstream media, so it's the same thing for us.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Another thing worth noting in that speech that gave me pause, my daughter was homesick today, and I was listening to this on headphones while I was sitting next to her, and I was like, no, girl, no. After I heard that, my daughter's like, what are you watching? This is what I was watching.
And that's why on pandemic preparedness, we support efforts to develop a new global health legal instrument, strengthened international health regulations, and a strong and empowered World Health Organization.
Nope. No, I don't like any of those words.
So we need to make the World Health
Global legal mandates.
Yeah, this is what we've been talking about here on the show, guys. This is all part of this new world order, this unipolar world order. And when you hear that, when Vladimir Putin gets up and says, no, the only way forward is a multipolar order, sovereign states that care for their own people, right? Regardless of what you think about Putin, like that pisses them off, because this idea of a unipolar world government health organization that's going to supersede governments to tell them to lock down, to put their digital currency in the hands of this world. That's exactly what they want, guys. The World Health Organization wants to be able to have total control, and the United States went along with it. Canada went along with it. New Zealand's going along with it. Thank God Brazil and Africa, an African nation, stood up and said, no.
Well, Brazil under President Bolsonaro.
Yes.
We'll see what happens now under new Brazilian leadership.
True, yeah. But but you're watching it. So you want to know how this stuff unfolds? It's out there in the open. You can read the documents. You can listen to the Prime Minister of New Zealand. You can listen to the Prime Minister of Canada. You can listen to the President of the United States, all saying the same thing. Mm-hmm. It's happening. Like, it's not a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
It's right in front of our freaking faces. It's happening.
So
that was my question all along. I was like, how in the world is all of this happening globally? Like, it was like the narrative that came out of the U.S. was just accepted, and no questions were asked about anything. It's just like, nope, we're doing it. Boom, boom, boom. They all fell in line. And like, we're still fighting to get data of exactly what has happened. But it's like, I just was so confused. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, and because of these meetings, right? When they get together, and they're not even secret, it's on their agenda. Here are the meetings. Here's in our documents what we're going to talk about and what our goals are for the Great Reset Plan and the World Health Organization taking control of the currency and lockdowns so that individual countries don't have to then vote. We can just supersede all of that, right? It's all part of the documents. It's all part of the plan.
Yes. So thank you to our New Zealand viewers who sent us a lot of that information and continue to do so. We are watching this story, and those are just, those are international policies that I do not agree with, and I find just as troubling, and we will continue to watch.
Hans in our chat said, "Thank you, Redacted, for making me uncomfortable. Thank you for doing what you do." That's what, that's our tagline here. Like, you ready to get uncomfortable? Because this should make you uncomfortable. Like, this is how we have, like Dr. Shiva talked about, having a bottom-up change. We need to have it come from us. It needs to come from us, right? It needs to, like what's happening in Canada with the censorship law. It comes from your votes. It comes from your voices in Canada standing up against this. Same thing in New Zealand. Same thing in the United States. And we've got more news to get to. We're going to talk about what peace looks like when people speak out in Ethiopia, right? And how that actually happens because people come together and actually solve problems. The same thing we hope in Haiti, except that's not likely to happen right now. We're going to be in Haiti in just a moment as we look at the United States invasion of Haiti, which could come at any day. Arguably, the details are already unfolding before us and could come right after the midterm elections. U.S. Air Force jets already arriving inside of Haiti, so we'll see what that looks like. But first, we are heading for an economic disaster. An economic collapse in the coming months. Jerome Powell raised interest rates again yesterday. I was talking to a financial friend of mine this afternoon, and he said something big is coming. He said it's absolutely going to be catastrophic, and no one's prepared for it. Inflation at all-time highs, stocks, crypto plummeting. Just take a look at Bitcoin, lost 2/3 of its value. And there are troubling signs ahead for the U.S. dollar as it continues to lose value through inflation. And of course, now the reversal of the dollar index. People need to start paying attention to gold and silver and tangible assets to protect themselves. I hope you're protecting your family against what's coming, because if you're not, then you need to learn about gold and silver. I've been talking about it for years on this show. You can add, I don't know if you know this, you can actually add physical gold and silver to your IRA or your 401k. Away from stocks, away from these government currencies, you can put this in your 401k and in your IRA. It's sustained for 4,000 years. As governments have failed, gold and silver have sustained. Yes, I'm doing it. It's in my plan, my retirement plan. You should as well. You can do it very easily too with our friends at Lear Capital. All you need to do is call their 800 number. It's right here on the screen. So write this number down. If you want to just call them, they'll give you can get a free gold kit so they can kind of walk you through it. Again, it's 1-800-613-3557 to learn more. If you want to learn more, call Lear Capital today. Ask about their Lear Advantage IRA, where you can transfer or roll over your old 401k or your IRA into a gold tax-free and penalty-free account. And to sweeten the deal, Lear Capital is also offering free shipping on every purchase of gold or silver and you're also going to get up to $15,000 in free silver as a bonus for qualified clients. Lear Capital is the gold standard in precious metals investing and has over 3 billion in trusted transactions with 650,000 happy customers. You can look at their Trustpilot ratings. It's got like almost a perfect score on Trustpilot. They've been in business for 25 years. So the phone number again is 1-800-613-3557. And if you don't want to call them, you can simply click the link. We'll have it in the description below, but the link is learredacted.com if you want to go to the website as well and check that out. Again, that is learredacted.com, and you can check it out to get that free investor package. Well, of course, we've been following the coming invasion of Haiti. U.S. forces getting ready. Could be any day now, perhaps post midterm elections for that boots on the ground to occur in Haiti. There's fighting unfolding as we speak. We want to go live now to Dan Cohen. Redacted sent Dan down to Port-au-Prince, who is there joining us now live with the very latest on this. Dan, welcome to the show. You got in there last night. What did you see upon arrival there? What have you been seeing over the past couple of hours?
Well, the first thing, Clayton, that you notice is that the streets are very empty. Usually this downtown area that I'm in is just full of traffic, bumper to bumper often, and bustling with life. And there are motorcycles, but very few vehicles because nobody can afford fuel. In addition to the blockade on the Vero fuel terminal. So very little going on downtown itself. And then at the airport, we saw U.S. military, U.S. Air Force cargo planes. Those brought in fuel supplies for the U.S. Embassy here in Port-au-Prince, along with other supplies. Who knows what else, what other kind of military assets, unknown at this point. So that's the basic situation. If you look over my right shoulder back here, that is where the Vero gas terminal, the fuel terminal that's under blockade is. And there have been skirmishes between the police and the G9 and its leader, Jimmy Barbecue Cherizier, every day, including right now. We just heard reports of explosions at the fuel terminal. So the situation is really hot right now.
So these explosions, the fighting that's happening at the fuel terminal right now, who's involved in that fighting?
So at the fuel terminal, the blockade has been going on for several weeks, and it's being blockaded by Jimmy Cherizier, whose nickname is Barbecue, the leader of a group called the FRG9, the Revolutionary Forces of the G9 family and allies. And Cherizier and the G9 and the FRG9 put up this blockade at the beginning of the protests against these IMF-imposed fuel hikes. So we have aerial footage that we shot very recently of the blockades throughout Port-au-Prince and around the Vero gas terminal. The blockade itself consists of trenches that have been dug, as well as shipping containers to block any kind of vehicles going through. And there are currently heavy clashes going on between the FRG9 and Haitian National Police forces. Every day, the Haitian police have been trying to wrest control to resume the flow and basically take over. But so far, they have not prevailed. I mean, we're going into, I think this is week 9. So, but the situation just remains hot.
Have you seen it when you talk to, have you talked to Jimmy Cherizier aka Barbecue. Have you talked to his side and what they expect from U.S. intervention?
In my conversations with Jimmy Barbecue Cherizier, he specifically mentioned that he knows the U.S. is interested in Haiti's natural resources. We're talking about bauxite, talking about natural gas deposits that are extremely valuable, and he knows that these could be used to develop the country, but instead that the U.S. wants to take these resources for its own benefit and leave the masses, the population here, living in the dire conditions that they've been in, for decades.
Now, you've been obviously going around the city over the past 24 hours. You've shot a lot of different footage and these blockades are not just at the fuel terminal. So where are you seeing these blockades? All over the city?
Yeah, all over downtown Port-au-Prince, in the kind of really around the poor neighborhoods where people have come out to protest. They've erected barricades. So it's not only the barricade on the fuel terminal being run by the FRG-9 and Barbecue. There are several of these that we filmed with a drone. Some of which are on the main street, almost like the Broadway or Fifth Avenue of Port-au-Prince, called Grand Rue. There are school buses blocking it, giant piles of debris. There are several of these. So the whole idea that the U.S. and mainstream media has said that, there's just this one blockade, and once we take that out, then everything will return to normal, totally ignores all of these blockades that neighborhoods have put up to stop fuel from coming out of the terminal, even if Jimmy Cherizier and his blockade were removed.
What about the mood, the sentiment there at the hotel and just in the streets, the people that you're talking to, this awareness that the United States is coming, this coalition, whether it's the United States by itself or United States and partners like Canada, et cetera, who are coming to invade their country? What are people talking about?
Overall, Haitians are very sensitive to any kind of foreign intervention because of their history, which has been shaped by foreign intervention. So pretty much anyone you talk to in the streets is very much opposed to U.S. military presence, to any country meddling in their affairs, especially through military means. So any kind of military intervention will be met with stiff resistance, not only from the armed groups in the neighborhoods, but also just from the people in general who do not want to see foreign boots on the ground, as they call it, trampling Haitian soil.
Well, Dan, we want you to stay safe. We understand, obviously, gunfire and still attacks are unfolding at this hour. You just reporting those a few minutes ago. Please keep us in the loop and stay safe there. And we will have you back on the show real soon to bring us the latest update live from Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Dan, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Clayton.
And I should mention just a short time ago, a few minutes ago, Dan, they just released their first part of their documentary on Haiti called Another Vision Inside Haiti's Uprising. Episode 1 is now available, just dropped on his on their YouTube channel, Uncaptured Media. It's called Another Vision Inside Haiti's Uprising. This is episode 1. Yeah, you can check my laptop if you want here. It's I'm not going to show the video, but if you go to their website, you go to their YouTube, it's Another Vision Inside Haiti's Uprising, episode 1. Excellent documentary that they just published. So this is independent media at its finest. Dan and his team doing a great job. So we were proud to be able to send Dan to Haiti to cover this story. Really important.
Well, we're going to give you an update on Ethiopia and the peace talks there in just a moment. But first, we'd like to tell you about our friends over at Podium. Now, if you own a small business, you know that the past couple of years have been hard. Obviously, communication with your clientele is paramount, from supply chain issues to increased demand. You got to stay on top of all of these things. That is continuing to get challenging, and you need to make sure that your customers know that you're on it. Now, a lot of people hate calling a business and would rather just send a quick message. That's where Podium comes in. It is a platform that allows you to communicate with your customers in a way that they prefer. For instance, I've had on my to-do list to call this one company for days and days, because the idea of actually putting down what I'm doing and calling a company just bums me out so much.
Yes.
And whenever there is an option to talk to a company that has a solution like Podium, I am right there with them. Even if it says, we'll get to you in a few minutes, I'm like, fine, I will be with you. I'll be waiting here on this platform that just works for me. From healthcare providers to plumbers, over 100,000 businesses are texting with customers now with Podium because you just go to where the customers are. One car dealer sold a truck for $50,000 in just 4 text messages. A jeweler sold a $5,000 ring, coordinated curbside pickup, all through text. There's no reasons to do this the old way. So see how Podium can grow your business and watch a demo today at podium.com/redacted. That's podium.com/redacted. Podium, let's grow.
Well, a story we've been following very closely here is what's unfolding with peace negotiations in Ethiopia. Peace agreement was reached in Ethiopia between the government and the Tigray rebel group known as the TPLF. This was confirmed by Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. If this agreement is honored, it would end 2 years of bloody fighting in a conflict that has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. This story has not gotten the attention of the mainstream media in the way that it needs to. Someone who's been following the story very closely is journalist Hermela Ayyadurai. And I stare at the last name and I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get it right. I hope I got it right. Hermela, did I get it right or did I screw it up again?
Close enough. Aragawi, no worries.
Aragawi.
Aragawi.
All right, I'm going to say it 5 times fast. All right, Hermela Ayyadurai, journalist, has been watching this very, very closely. Thank you so much for joining us back here on the show. Can you talk about some of the main tenets of this agreement?
Absolutely. First of all, for most of us, this was a shock, right? People's Liberation Front even came to this agreement. We expected them to drag their feet. But essentially what they have agreed to is to disarm whatever is left of their rebel group. Speaking, they had already enabled. Otherwise, this is a group for 50 years that is known to use war to solve its issues. So they agreed to disarm within 30 days completely, to get rid of any heavy machinery left within 10 days. And then they are going to be delisted off the terrorist list by Ethiopian parliament if they are willing to do this, because then they will no longer be as much of a danger to the public if them and their cadres are disarmed. So there can be one army in the country that's a part of the agreement. They've also agreed not to support or provide support for other armed groups in the country. They've also agreed to not work with foreign countries and groups against the country. Both of those things outside of the armament also admits what most of us had already suspected, which is that they are supporting and arming other armed groups in the country and then working with countries, the suspicion is like Egypt and others, to work against the Ethiopian interests and their own interest of their armed rebels. So these are great. This is a great start. This would actually create peace in the country if they followed through with it. I was a little bit concerned that maybe they wouldn't, or their cadres may not want to disarm after being told that this war was about genocide. And then all of a sudden there's an agreement with the government for them to have to disarm. So there might be some extremist elements left behind because of this 2-year war. So that's something that the government's going to have to deal with. But in general, what I'm hearing is they don't have a military upper hand. So most people were forced at this point to fight for them. And so the disarmament may go more smoothly than some people might think.
This is great news. I mean, it's not often on this show we get to talk about peace, and we push for it. This is great news. When we last spoke on our show, you reported that the TPLF leaders were being flown out of the country on U.S. airplanes, possibly to Canada. Did that happen?
It has not happened yet. My understanding is they're still in South Africa. Some of them may return to Tigray. Some of them may not. It looks like they're still in South Africa, maybe being flown to Nairobi for some medical care in some cases is what I've been told. But the Canada deal has not gone through yet. We don't have a sense of if it's going to go through because that report came out before the deal happened. And another element of the deal that may suggest that they might actually stay in Ethiopia is they'll be delisted off the terrorist organization list, and then they'll actually be able to stick around as a political group, which for some people was really hard to swallow, but it was the concession that the Ethiopian government made. And my perspective is it was a worthwhile concession because so many lives are going to be lost. And it will be up to the people if they are for this ethno-fascist ideology that says ethnic Tigrayans need to run the whole country by any means necessary, that the people of Tigray need to bleed and die in order for this few people in the top leadership to take over the Ethiopian government for once again. So it's going to be up to the people to decide, is this an ideology that we can go with or not? And I think that's the concession that the Ethiopian government had to make for the sake of peace.
Last month, hundreds of thousands of people protested in Ethiopia in favor of the government against Western intervention, which they say has supported the rebels, dragged the conflict on and on and on. The United States says that it supports the peace terms. Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, tweeted this just a short time ago, saying, "We welcome the signing of a cessation of hostilities between the government of Ethiopia and the Tigray People's Liberation Front and commend the African Union for its extraordinary efforts to bring this peace to northern Ethiopia." So will this stick?
Let's hope so. Here's a nuance in Secretary Blinken's statement and other statements from the State Department. They keep saying cessation of hostilities. They refuse to mention the word disarmament, which would be the very thing that would actually end this conflict. Cessation of hostilities had been had twice in this conflict since it started in November 2020. The first time, June 2021, and then again around April 2022. Both times, the TPLF broke that cessation of hostilities, the humanitarian truce, and went into the offensive into neighboring regions. So a cessation of hostilities is not going to bring us to peace because the TPLF is known for regrouping and then just using whatever else they have left, whatever people they have left to try to fight this government. So the actual document says disarmament, and it goes step by step and disarmament. And the fact that the U.S. and the Secretary of State refuses to say that is undermining, once again, the deal that was signed in South Africa. You know, I hate to say it as an American, but the U.S. government and its foreign policy when it comes to Ethiopia and this conflict have really fuel the conflict. And this is another sign that they're just not willing to move forward against this rebel group, which has been largely defeated anyway for the sake of the peace of the country. A lot of people have died in Tigray. In particular, a lot of people have died in the northern region of Tigray because of this war, not because there was an attempted genocide, but because they were forced by this leadership that got to get on a plane and go to South Africa to go into war, to be pushed into war. So I don't know what it is, but the U.S. just is not letting up. And this deal was largely made by the African Union, as well as former Nigerian President Obasanjo, former Kenyan President Kenyatta, and a former deputy president from South Africa, because this is about sovereignty. And so African countries are looking at this and saying, if Ethiopia can't get over this, then we will not be able to get over whatever challenges come our way when there's this Western allied, former regime powerful group that decides to regime change. We need to get behind this is a sense that I get from talking to people. We need to get behind this because this isn't just about Ethiopia. This is about sovereignty all across the continent.
And well, the United States, of course, has seen Ethiopia as a major power center for them, right? Access, of course, to Africa. And so will the United States leave? Will there be a United States presence any longer? Will they say goodbye? Will they not be involved in this any longer, do you think? Or is that just... that's just fantasy?
Oh, I mean, no way. They're going to be as involved. Right. They're going to be as involved as they can. I mean, the Ethiopia tries to stay as friendly with the United States. I mean, nobody really wants to piss off the United States to such a degree. I mean, they do what they have to do, but the U.S. Embassy is still there. There's a lot of NGOs that still operate there. There's a lot of people from all over the world that call Ethiopia home, particularly the capital city of Addis. It's actually the U.S. that tries to, at times, to pull people out of Ethiopia, international communities, telling them there's some sort of a danger when in fact there's nothing near the capital city that is a danger. In general, it's pretty under control except for the Tigray region. So Ethiopia welcomes people from all over the world home. Many Americans have called it home for years and decades. But the U.S., as a foreign policy arm, they'll stay there for as long as they can. It's just, will they change their approach or not? And chances are they're not. So the people have to just stay united and work towards this peace, including the people of Tigray, who I believe have gotten sick of the TPLF, have figured out who they are, and have come to the realization that the Ethiopian government is not against them as a people.
I want to ask you about the media saying that the hopes now that aid, actual humanitarian aid, can make its way to Tigray. But many say that the aid has been, has already been getting into that region just fine. Can you comment on that?
Absolutely. Oh, humanitarian aid politics, something I've genuinely learned about in the last 2 years. They were saying there was a blockade for months and months, when in fact the World Food Program was sending in aid. There's been aid flowing through there for the 5 months prior to the August ceasefire that was broken by the TPLF. And wherever the areas that the Ethiopian National Defense Forces control, they try to get aid in there. But even beyond that, there's tons of aid stored in different parts of Tigray for the rebels. So one of the things that we found, or the Ethiopian government found, or the Ethiopian National Defense Forces found when they went into certain areas, is there was storage full of food and grain that the rebels had hogged up for themselves, and they actually ended up dispersing it to the local population. So Ethiopia does its best to feed the Tigray region, even though it's been really just a leech because of this terrorist group for much of this 2 years. I mean, it's a developing country, and it's been spending so much money on this war, and all of this effort has been specifically focused on Tigray to get humanitarian aid so that the quote-unquote international community, the U.S., does not use it as an excuse to penalize Ethiopia via sanctions, etc. So we're happy. Of course, anytime there's humanitarian aid that goes into that area, both my parents are from there. We don't want anybody to get hurt. We don't want anybody to be without. But that coming from the U.S. is always just, makes, at this point, Ethiopians and Eritreans roll their eyes, because you don't care about the people. You use this as an avenue to just make it look like the people and the government are not wanting to feed their own citizens in the Tigray region, but they've always made that effort.
I'll get you out of here on this question. When you tweeted a short time ago about the capital of Tigray, it's going to be under the control of the federal government of Ethiopia per the new peace agreement. So then the TPLF just gave up control of this region after screaming about genocide for the past 2 years. What's their rationale here?
They lost the military war. They lost a war. That's pretty much their rationale. They lost a war, and they, as the leadership, wants to go back to their luxurious lives. They do not want to die, because a few of their comrades have died early in the war by soldiers. They were killed by soldiers. Allegedly, they were hiding in some caves that would not surrender. I don't know the exact specific conditions, but that was essentially their fate. The ones who got on a U.S. military train and went to South Africa, if they stuck around because the Ethiopian National Defense Forces were moving into the capital of Mekelle, that might have been their fate. So they wanted to save themselves, do not care about the people, and they went ahead and signed this deal that said that, okay, the Ethiopian National Defense Forces can have Mekelle because we don't have enough forces to hold it, and we just want, I think it was really about saving themselves. So it will be interesting to see how the people in Tigray react to this decision, because like you said, they've been told all along that this was about them and erasing them as an ethnicity. And so when they see this leadership just signs on the dotted line and said, okay, we'll disarm and we'll vacate what's left of our troops out of the capital city, then it's gonna really hit them what has really happened and how they were the sacrificial lamb for a power effort that actually never happened either.
Fascinating. This is why this story, this conflict has been so nuanced and important to get these facts out there. We really appreciate you joining us, Hermela Aragawe. I got it right, finally.
Yes, you got it. See, second time.
A little practice.
If I could add, Clayton, because this is so important, there's been so much sacrifice made to get to this point.
Right.
There's so many Ethiopian National Defense Forces, so many citizens that have died just unnecessarily in this. And so it does feel like victory for those of us who are privileged to be in the diaspora, but so many lives. When I was in Addis and saw this little kid who didn't have his dad because he died as a soldier and had to go receive an award with his mom for it, like those moments is when you realize, oh my God, like a lot of people are dying unnecessarily for this to happen. And the U.S. was a part of enabling this group that created this kind of conflict. So just a huge moment of gratitude for all of those who sacrificed to protect the sovereignty of their country and lead the country into peace. And thank you for having me.
It's an amazing moment. It's an amazing moment. And we hope that this is a beacon of hope for other instances where we can try to push for peace in other areas around the world right now. So here's a model. Here's a template, perhaps, what we can do going forward. Hermela, thank you so much for joining us. And thanks for your great journalism on this. And we will continue to stay in touch. Thanks again.
Thank you.
It really is an amazing moment. I mean, we talk so often of war on this show, and of course, we are vehemently anti-war on this show. If that's one thing that we are, maybe politically, I don't know if that's even politically, but to be able to come on here and talk about peace.
Yeah, that we really hope will stick.
Yeah, so, it's amazing.
Yeah, that it can be done. Other countries, let's try. Yeah. Give it a try.
And we talked we talked before about the idea that this could be, or some of these situations could be templates for future conflicts, to say, see what Ethiopia was able to do here.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see if the United States manages to keep its nose out of this. But as we've talked about before, the CIA and the U.S. government have long labeled Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa as the main port there, and of course, and into Somalia as major influence hubs. So it'll be interesting to see if the United States manages. How many people think the United States will keep their hands off of it? Raise your hand. Let me know.
In the chat.
100%.
Yeah.
MYOB, guys.
Just like in Haiti, right? I mean, just like in Haiti. Like, can we please keep our hands off of these countries for once? Just let them grow. Let them prosper. All right. I want to thank all of you for subscribing to the channel and being a part of what we do here and supporting independent journalism. All you need to do, you can subscribe to the channel for free. Is if I could just ask you on this Thursday to just share. I'm going to do this maybe every Thursday or maybe once a month. I don't ask you to do it often, but please just click the share button and share it with like one other person that you think might want to learn this type of information about the news. Like maybe you've got a relative that you always see watching CNN. Maybe you just like send them this show. Just click on the share button and say, can you watch Redacted? Just give it a shot. Give it a shot for a week. So hit the share button, text it to a friend or a loved one. Maybe you can post it on social media, on your Facebook page, that kind of a thing.
And I see those of you who tag us and do that, and I appreciate that so much. So I try and always push the little heart on Twitter. Thank you so much for tagging us in those shares.
Put it out on Twitter, anywhere you want to share it. But to someone, I think it's usually helpful because we've had a lot of people tell us that they discovered the show because their friend texted them the show.
Yeah.
Like, hey, check this out. And that's great because all we're doing here is we want to be able to spread the truth and share the truth and be able to cover these stories. We worked in the mainstream media for many, many years, and we're able to do this independently, free of any billionaires telling us what to do. So with your support is how we grow. That's it. Without your support, we totally collapse. So we will continue to have great journalists on this show and continue to do what we can do, covering stories like in Haiti and Ethiopia and what's going on in Ukraine and the corruption of our government. And these powerful elites. So with that having said, let's take a look at your super chats before we get you out of here on this Thursday.
And before we do the super chats, while David is looking those up, I just want to remind you, this is the last night that we will be separated from the East Coast by 4 hours. Next week it goes back to 5 because you all set your clocks back this weekend if you're in the United States and I think most of North America. And so we already did. So we will continue at 9 p.m. Western European time.
So that's a long way of saying next week we'll be back to normal.
In North America.
Yes. 4 p.m. Eastern time, 9 p.m. Western European time.
I actually don't know if South America changes clocks. So
I don't know. Daylight saving, please end. All right, David, go ahead.
Okay, really quick, I wanted to share really quick too. I did a poll at the beginning of the show because I was really curious because we're hearing about the red wave coming and everything in the elections. So I asked, what party did you vote for or plan to vote for in the midterms? And out of 19,200 votes, 62% Republican, 3% Democrat, 8% third party, 27% don't vote.
Interesting.
Wow, 27% don't vote. So you think think about how many politicians could say, you know, what if we went after that 27% instead of trying to always play inside of the two-party system? What if we said, hey, the 27% of people that don't vote, because over 100 million Americans in the United States elections don't vote. Imagine if they spent the time to talk to those people and to find out what they want and what they want from their country.
I think that is actually pretty representative of the population that doesn't vote. It's close to 30%.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I always find that our chat is pretty representative of a mix of the population because we're not left or right here. I think that's a huge reason.
Yeah.
Lewis Haggerty, thank you so much for creating this platform of truth.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming to it.
Yeah, as you say, we couldn't, if you weren't here, then we wouldn't have it. So thank you so much.
Penguina, greetings from Lord Kenzo. And I saw somebody said a funny name that I thought would be great because it kind of combines your names. Lord Claymore.
Lord Claymore. Lord Claymore. With my established titles proclamation. That's right. Lord Claymore. But it does say Clayton Morris. Know ye here, therefore, that Clayton Morris, better known as Lord of Scotland, Lord Clayton Morris.
Is it legal to? Can I get the plot next to yours and then annex yours through force, or do I have to?
Well, only if I attack you for 8 years.
Yeah. Skynet just recently discovered your show. Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Jaden, in Australia, they just flooded the people out of their homes on the east side and then purchased the land dirt cheap. Lots of cloud seeding involved. I don't know what that is.
Cloud seeding is something that
I'm working on a story for the show on weather manipulation. So I've been working on it for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
In fact, the United States government did it during the Vietnam War in order to flood certain supply routes for enemy lines so that they couldn't get through. It's been done before by governments. I have heard this.
It's continuing to happen right now, like literally as we speak. And you look up and you see chemtrails, you know exactly what's going on. So it's happening and it's happening. Saudi Arabia, we can see the planes. I've got video I'm going to show you where it's a story I'm working on, hopefully for next week here on Redacted.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to that. Stephen Fafa Mongstad, Norwegian farmers are being asked to stop egg and meat production.
Stop? Or stop?
Stop.
Oh.
Stop.
I like Teresa. Teresa in our chat says she is going to call me Lord Clayton. She said, Teresa says, Lord Clayton, consider it done. Thank you. Thank you, Teresa. Appreciate it.
Muddy Creek Critters. I spent 2 weeks in New Zealand, a memorable trip with Trey and team. Awesome. It was great to meet you there. Hopefully common sense rules over unsustainable political posturing and crazy narratives in New Zealand. Cheers, Mike J.
Hey, Mike. That's awesome. That's the time I went to New Zealand. And with Trey Ratcliffe, one of the great photographers, spent quite a bit of time there with Trey and Mike and a whole group of great guys and shooting good photography. We just went all around and shot photos. It was one of the great times of my life. It really was. So it was amazing.
And then we'll leave on this note. Meredith Eve, thank you all for bringing so much truth to light.
Well, thank you. And thanks to all of you for subscribing to the channel. We're very, very close. On my birthday is New Year's Eve, December 31st. And our goal is we have a thing called Redacted Rebel VIPs. Okay, so if you become a rebel here on Redacted and you join our VIP program, our goal is to hit 3,000 of you.
Nope,
right now,
that's not true.
Oh, it's not?
I increased it to 3,500. We're doing so good.
You moved the goalpost. All right.
All right. Hey, I'll go for that. So 3,500 Redacted Rebels. VIPs. So all you need to do is go to redacted.inc, not .com, and on the right-hand side of the screen it says become a VIP member, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support our show and what we do here. If that's important to you, there's this whole back and forth yelling right now about Elon Musk wanting to, and then we have our whole locals community. In fact, we'll have a brand new video that's going to go up to our locals community tomorrow first before anyone else will see it. So you'll get to see that tomorrow if you're a part of our VIP community. It's a whole interview that I've done with a former Marine it's really eye-opening, who was in Iraq and 2 tours in Iraq. So that will go out to our VIP members, and we're also doing exclusive content over there as well. But I should say, this whole back and forth of Elon Musk wanting to charge $8 now to get a blue verified check mark.
Yeah.
You see all these crybabies like AOC, I'm out of here, $8, I'm out of here. It's like, okay.
No, you're not, because she likes to scream on there.
But my point is that literally, because she's always talking about her Starbucks, and the drinks that is literally the price of her Starbucks for one day to have her, Anyway, so all I'm saying is for the price of a cup of coffee, you can support what we do here as independent journalists. And I was talking to Hermela a little bit offline about our, independent journalism, and just the idea that we need to be crowd supported. We don't have billionaires backing us. So when you support our show, you're supporting the journalism that we're able to do here and be able to send Dan to Haiti to bring you boots on the ground stories from those regions as well. So my 2 cents on that.
Like you said, we don't have billions backing us, but we have billionaires trying to silence us, like YouTube and this big machine that's trying to keep us from telling you what we want to tell you.
That's right. So we're up against that. So thank you guys. Much love to all of you. We will see you back here over the weekend with some different content as well as redacted VIP content. And we will be back here live on Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Western European Time. Much love to all of you. Now get some rest. Bye, everyone.